now everything is about creative and fashion and sports, and it was not like that back then at all. There wasn't a landscape like that.
Yeah.
Fashion and football right at this moment are having a real love moment in America between like NFL, NBA, right? You've got, I think one of the first announcements was like Daniel Arsham. He's a designer and an artist. He was appointed the creative director of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Okay.
You got Ronnie Fieg of the brand Kith, who became the creative director of the New York Knicks.
Oh wow.
You've got Don C, Kanye's old creative director and business partner, was appointed the creative director of the Chicago Bulls. The entry point into the creative world can be tough because sometimes the roles are not clear. Whatever looks very far can become very close, like so quickly. It's tough, man, and it can feel lonely at times. Do you know what I mean? Everyone likes to talk about the exciting stuff, like it can feel lonely, man.
Today's guest is self-made, and I can only describe him as a trailblazer. Kenny Annan Jonathan is the first creative director working with a Premier League football club, and he's also the founder of marketing agency The Mailroom. Today, we talk about everything. Enjoy the show. I'm going to use one word to describe today's guest: trailblazer. He's probably heard this a few times before, but for those who are meeting Kenny for the first time, Kenny is the first creative director working with a Premier League football club. So yeah, big welcome to Kenny, bro. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good, brother. Thank you for having me.
Bro, absolute pleasure. We like to start with a little icebreaker. Mm-hmm. What did you want to be growing up, bro?
Oh, random, you know. A doctor.
Hey!
Yeah, random.
Yeah.
But that was probably, if I'm honest with you, that's probably just because of lack of options.
Yeah.
And it's the only thing that sounded like it was a thing when I was, but I'm talking like, I was probably about 10.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
My parents wanted me to be a doctor, and I just knew that wasn't for me, bro. The sight of blood and all that. You're good with blood?
No, I'm terrible.
okay.
But do you know what it is? I'll be honest, like after that and then when reality kicked in, I had no idea for years what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I think everything I've done, I've kind of fallen into.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, like before, I want to go back, but before we go back, like, yeah, creative director at Crystal Palace Football Club. Yeah. Can you like just give us a flavour as to what that role involves?
Yeah, so I guess like a lot of the time people are really excited by the headlines and titles, but just to kind of put it in layman's terms, it's more about my role is to, you know, bring the club up to speed with like, I guess just more cultural relevance in terms of like understanding how we can connect and communicate with audiences that, well, both traditional and non-traditional audiences. I guess where the landscape of sports is going, and football has been going for a very long time, there are some of those micro communities that have kind of been left out. It's like, how do we bridge the gap between the two? And just telling the story of the club like in the best way possible. And that might be through media and content, that might be through apparel and collaborations, which is predominantly one of my core pillars there. And yeah, just all the above. It's just a fun mix-up of a lot of things.
I love that. And before we like double click more into that, I think like for the listener who like may never have heard of you before, like they must be thinking, job sounds sick, like you said. Like how does someone become like the creative director at a football club? So like just briefly, could you like take us back? Because you mentioned the fact that you want to be a doctor. You also said, you know, you kind of fell into your roles. Yeah. Like have you always been creative? Yeah, take us through some of the key moments in your journey up until this point.
Yeah, I think, you know, I've always had a creative desire, but identifying it was the grey area, because you know sometimes you grow up and you just do certain things because it's something that you're interested in, but you haven't labelled it yet. And especially when where I'm coming from in South London, creativity wasn't necessarily like the thing that was championed back then. Facts. So yeah, do you know what I mean? So I guess for me it's like I guess to kind of really give a bit more context, like my background's actually in fashion. I ran a streetwear brand like in like the mid 2000s. I was a graphics designer by trade actually, but not for what I studied. I'm self-taught and.
Oh wow, YouTube University.
Yeah, man. That's it, man. Just trial and error, man. Photoshop was my friend very early on, making a lot of like, started off, you know, like just online making pictures for friends when I was younger. And it just kind of like, you just exercise it a bit more. And I think I landed myself like a job, you know, my first real graphics design job when I'd finished school. And I'm talking like my highest form of education was like my sixth form.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, but I landed a job at TK Maxx or TJ Maxx as their like just one of their lead designers for graphics. Yeah.
Oh wow!
Very random story, but it came through my wife's colleague's husband, who was the creative director of TJ Maxx, and then we went out to dinner one time, and he heard what I'd done, looked at my portfolio. Just through just stuff that I've been doing for friends, from fashion to industry, and just decided, yeah, let's give it a shot.
Amazing. So I'm hearing there that you've had a portfolio from early, and by constantly adding to that portfolio, when a networking opportunity came about, you had kind of the catalogue, right, to show and land that first job. And then, yeah, like in terms of like this actual role within Crystal Palace, right? Like, do they reach out to you? Are you reaching out to them? Like,
again, it's such a long journey because, you know, transitioning from fashion into what I do now, my first client was Wilfred Zaha.
Okay.
So naturally, that's where you can kind of see where that relationship comes, right? I work with him. You know, I get to know the guys at Crystal Palace. I get to know Steve Parrish like years ago, maybe like 7-8 years ago, just around helping with a lot of stuff. But then the team also seeing what I was doing with Wilfred in that space, when now everything is about creative and fashion and sports, and it was not like that back then at all. There wasn't a landscape like that.
Yeah.
So for what I was trying to do and build up, me and Steve would have a lot of conversations around just like creativity within sports. And I just said there was a huge gap within cultural marketing. This was like, again, like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And then, I just remember like having the conversation, just saying, look, because our conversation, actually, it ties down to that World Cup where it was like the Nigeria kit and the England kit, both made by Nike, and the Nigeria kit kind of flew off the shelves.
Yeah, the light green one.
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
The zigzag, I got it.
Exactly, there we go.
Yeah.
But the England kit didn't sell as well, and we ended up having a conversation around it. And I said, look, after like having a deep conversation, I said, look, I think there's a huge space for cultural marketing. I know you don't have a cultural department, but I think there's a real space to kind of develop in that area. Mm-hmm. You know, we was having conversations, and it was great, but it didn't move quick enough, so everything kind of like dissolved. I was still cool with them. I was still working with Wilf. By then, my roster had gone from Wilf to a number of clients in an array of sports.
Okay.
So I built out, you know, my personal network through work that I had done, but then I was building my agency, which I never really wanted to do in the beginning also. So I built out the agency, had a number of success with it, and I remember there was a magazine that came out that said, do sports teams need creative directors? This was a year and a half ago. Do you know what I mean? So think about that's a gap. That's like a 6-year gap since my first conversation. And I sent it over to Steve. And I said, look, man, we could have been like years above the Americans on this. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, by then I'd obviously built up, you know, a reputation within my space. And he was like, let's just come back in for the meeting. And they asked me to pitch. I then pitched to the guys. And, we're here now. So I wasn't necessarily appointed. I pursued. And then the title just became what it was.
I love that. And I think like that's the takeaway, right? There's no handouts. Like I've just released an episode with like a director at a bank, and she got there by saying, yeah, when I want something, I got to go for it. So hearing it from you saying that you've pursued, like there's a thread there. Like these people that get to these positions, there's no gimme. It's I'm going, I go and I take. So I love that. There's two things that you said that I want to double click into. First was you said like, we could have been so far ahead of the Americans.
Yeah.
So has the like role of creative director at like NFL teams, NBA teams, has that been around for a bit longer then?
Yeah, but not too long. It was like a tongue-in-cheek joke, but like because you know they always say we're like 10 years behind the States in anything we do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So you know you look over for like in America between like NFL, NBA, right? You've got, I think one of the first announcements was like Daniel Arsham. He's a designer and an artist. He was appointed the creative director of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Okay.
You got Ronnie Feig of the Brand Kif, who became the creative director of the New York Knicks.
Oh wow.
You've got Don C, Kanye's old creative director and business partner, was appointed the creative director of the Chicago Bulls. Actually, it's funny because he calls himself Chicago Don C because he's from Chicago,
okay.
but like his history within the sport is rife. You've got Luigi Villaseñor from the brand Rude.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He was the creative director of the Arizona Coyotes, which is a hockey team. Like the list kind of goes on, but you see like a lot of like people within like the fashion industry that understand culture and community starting to do the same thing what they do in fashion for like teams now. And that's what they was building on. Sometimes it's just about having foresight and understanding, but I think like America's just really good at capitalizing on their cultural endeavors.
I love that. And then the other thing you mentioned was like, you went in like the second time round, you pitched the vision, and then obviously like the title comes after. Like to someone like Steve Parish, right, is he owns the club. For him, he's looking at pound signs and like money. When you're pitching like the financial impact of like culture, right? Like how is it we can ascertain the value that this can add to a football club like Crystal Palace?
Do you want me to be honest with you?
Yeah.
I didn't pitch the financial side.
Okay.
But I think one thing that either people don't know or they forget, Steve Parish comes from the creative world.
I didn't know that.
He owned an advertising agency. That's how he started.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So like with Steve, he's someone who gets it. He understands, but obviously you have to delegate towards your team. He's the chairman of the club, right? But so he gets it. He's like, he understands. When you get to meet him like personally, you'll understand his personality. Like, so he's into all of this stuff. He's like, we might be a bit out of touch here or a bit out of touch here. How do we connect? He's very hands-on with the kit designs and so on. So he wants to be across the board on everything.
Yeah.
But I love that about him. So our conversation actually had nothing to do with money at all.
Okay.
He understood like the community aspect of it and what the value that it adds to the club. The only time where we ended up speaking about money, which wasn't with Steve, it was about with the team of, between the commercial department, the retail staff and marketing. But other than that, it's been really like a wholesome conversation about building value for what we want to do, because, South London and the Croydon area in general is like so rich in community, and the plan was to capitalize on that.
Yeah, I love that. And that brings us nicely into, so I'm sure like people, they're always interested in, like you're the first creative director, but like to your point, like what does it actually mean? Like, can you take us through like a typical day, a typical week? Maybe there isn't a typical day and week, and like maybe like some of the projects that you're working on and like the different stakeholders that you typically work with. Yeah.
So again, like each day is different. Obviously, so a lot of the time, sometimes they're just project based. So I'll give you one just of recent, and I can say it now.
Okay.
But we've been like the first probably 6-7 months was just more about going through archives, getting understanding. People want things to be rushed. It doesn't work like that. You've got to really settle into the role, into like the community of the club, and actually get familiar with just what the club, embodies. Like that mantra of like South London and proud is a very big statement to make. So like my day to day looks like, obviously I have my agency, the Mailroom, where I'm managing talent. So I delegate to my team in terms of what needs to be done and so on and so forth. And then for me, sectioning off my time with Crystal Palace would be about, the first project was designing a collection. And it's funny because what I like to call it is like elevated merch.
Yeah.
Not necessarily fashion pieces. Like I'm not trying to go through all the trinkets and bells and whistles, but I think the club stores sometimes just need better offerings. It doesn't need to be made by the sponsors, or it doesn't need to be made in collaboration with luxury brands. I think just offerings of the day-to-day products that are in the store, what can you get? So it's just about going through materials, speaking to factories, the DNA of the club, what does that mean? And then how do we kind of transfer the club story into physical product, but then also speaking to a specific audience. So it's a lot of research, delegating back and forth between the various departments that I'm in communication with. They do give me a lot of freedom within my space, you know, to do whatever I need to do. But then I think also the other side of it is that you can't go too left. Do you know what I mean? Because you haven't built the audience for it yet. So again, it's just about understanding who the Crystal Palace core audience is, and what is the probably the younger audience that probably are being left out. So, you know, it's an array of things, but ultimately it's about me doing research, being very proactive with understanding the culture of the club. It's about designing and just finding out the understanding of, I guess, what the next stage of what the club looks like.
I love that. Yeah. And, you know, talking about like understanding what embodies the club and doing research on that. Yeah. Is that like going to games? Is it like interviews with fans? Is it just walking around the streets of South London? Yeah. Like, talk to me about how it is you go about understanding the target customer or audience.
Well, look, I think one of the beautiful things for me is, right, I'm from South London, and I was looking after like arguably their best ever player. So that South London and proud mantra I'm very familiar with from a personal perspective, but then also from a client perspective. I know what the club represents. I know what the area represents. I know what South London represents. So, you know, even just down to that and identifying it, like, I'll give you one example. Hey, I can speak about this now anyway. So last season kit, which was inspired by like their like signature graffiti kind of style, which, if I'm honest with you, stereotypically, actually, I'm not a huge fan of graffiti. I think, you know, just in terms of times, but I think there's always a way to make it tasteful. So I think from that last third kit, they still wanted to kind of tie the essence between, you know, new age apparel and tie it to the club. And, you know, every season, like the shirts get recycled and something new comes out. Yeah. And I think just for reasons of like connecting with something that's familiar, I thought, why don't we just look back through the archives of kits and then maybe bring certain styles and designs back, but in different forms. So I think that graffiti kit was one that was, it was like, obviously because it was only last season, it was like a prominent kit. So what we done is like infused it into more streetwear style silhouettes. It's all about the materials, the shapes, the fits, and just put it into a more digestible palette. You know, and even just going back through that like the graffiti style, like talking about, and this is not necessarily South London, but just London in general. You know, you look at a good friend of mine, actually, Wally Adeyemi, who's a designer, who is the founder of the brand B-Side. That, like, again, all through the 2000s, his whole thing was like the graffiti style. And you even just look on David Beckham's documentary that they released recently, a lot of his pieces are in there. Oh, is it? Yeah, you look at Marc Jacobs' new collection was all graffiti. I think Daily Paper have even done a recent graffiti range. So it's funny, so the essence and nuance of that graffiti street style is still there, but I think it also is like a reflection of like just what South London represents. Okay. So, you know, it was interesting to kind of like repurpose it for a bit more simpler formats.
And then you mentioned the fact that like you work on collections, and I heard you say something like, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to come from like a sponsor. Fun fact, for those eagle-eyed people, I'm wearing a Manchester United hoodie right now. Can I just say, the Adidas wear this year, they've gone retro. It slaps.
They've gone hard at it, bro. I give it to them, man.
It slaps. So, are you competing against sponsors, or is it something that you would like make in collaboration with sponsors? I suppose is the question.
No, it's not in competition with sponsors. Okay. And actually, I'm going to take it away from Manchester United, actually, if I'm honest with you, because, and I think it's great work from the retro style, but really and truly, Adidas have just repurposed their retro style across all the clubs that they sponsor.
No, they did.
Do you know what I mean? But I think it's dope. Like, I loved it. I loved the shoot that they done with like the players. Like, they had Kobe Mainoo in it. Yeah. Like, I think it looked dope. But we're not competing with them. Okay. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think it's a silly thing to compete with those people in those spaces because we're servicing our audience. And again, this is product that speaks to the South London community. Do you get what I'm saying? And the beautiful thing about it is that it actually has no Crystal Palace branding on it.
Wow.
So in that graffiti style last season, what it had is it had like South London and Proud etched into the graffiti very subtly. So that's probably the only thing that you see that ties back to Crystal Palace.
Okay.
So what it does is like really leaning on the mantra of South London and Proud. It allows, you know, the wider community to actually also wear the product too. Yeah. It's not just tied down to the club.
So on that, like when it does come down to like selling it, where is it that customers typically can purchase it from? Is it like all sports stores? Is it Crystal Palace's website? If it's not tied directly to the club?
Well, right now, for the first one, it will be online at the club store and physically in the club store. Okay. But we have plans to do a few kind of pop-ups and experiential events around to promote it.
And then you mentioned the fact that like you won't really know that it's Crystal Palace's. So does that mean like the traditional red and blue, like it's not the traditional colours, like it's going to be a little bit of everything?
Completely away from that.
Wow.
It's simple format. I don't think sometimes we overdo it. It doesn't need to be something crazy. I think it's about being comfortable and just having another offering. I think, you know, there's many reasons, you know, this really is almost like market research also. You've got to build the audience. We can't come out with something crazy, which I probably wanted to do at first. You can't come out with something crazy and expect people to jump at it. That means different materials at different price points. They mean, you know, timings and so. And then if you don't have the audience to it, you're just left with a lot of dead stock that you can't shift because the club doesn't represent that yet. We are building on it.
So on that, like, is it a like select few pieces with like a capacity versus a range that's for the wide the wide audience?
You said it yourself there. Okay. That's it. It's I think it's
I'm gonna get myself something because it might be worth a little bit of money in a few years. Now I know that it's exclusive.
It's a limited run. It's definitely a limited run. I think it's going to be something that you'll look back on. Like, and even just to give you like a thing, like, so me and Wilfred had a brand together, Long Live Studios, that we actually sold in the Crystal Palace Club store a few years ago.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so that's where it first started, which some people know, but not everyone knew. And when I go to games, I still see people wearing that cap.
That's sick.
And it's funny because the Palace lot used to come to me and was like, this is not something that we would design, these are not the price points that we would demand, but it was selling really well. And I said, because we story told really well. And that was the huge part. And obviously the product was great, but it was an offering that they didn't have. So naturally, most people flocked to it, right? And I think that was just it. It was like, there's offerings. Like, I think the good thing about this space is like, I really feel like we should just run it like a streetwear department. Yeah. Like the essence and energy of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like it's almost like a startup within the wider football club.
That's it. And I think they also look at it like that too.
And then, like on that, like what is the benchmark for success? Because like you said, we're not trying to tie like a financial number to it. So for you, what does like success look like from the collection?
I think it's more about noise. I think like numbers are always going to be an indicator, if I'm honest with you, but it's tricky at this stage. But I think for me, I think success is actually even just releasing the product at this point. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I think it's something that traditionally hasn't been done in that way. Like, we see a lot of people collaborating with a lot of brands and they're using their sponsors, but they're not developing their own collections. Yeah. That is a very big difference because you always have something to lean on. If something doesn't sell well, actually, traditionally, you have the power of big machines, which are great, I think. Like, as I said, like, the retro style stuff now is in collaboration with said brand. Or most of the announcements that you see are, this club has partnered with whatever brand, and then leaning on the power of that. With Crystal Palace, they only have the power of Crystal Palace to lean on. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
And I think that is the beautiful thing. So just, one, getting to the stage and putting it out is a huge thing. I think the second part of it is just seeing how the community engage with it. And I think that's the major thing for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I feel like as you're talking there, like I'm just like imagining like, yeah, like, you know, 20, 30 years down the line, you're going to a game and there's somebody in that top and you're like, I remember that, and you like started like a whole new wave. Yeah. There's so many directions I want to take it in. So first, like, yeah, like in terms of like building out this first collection,
Yeah.
is it just you? Like I know you've mentioned the fact that you're working with like lots of different departments. Are you pulling people in to work with yourself? Like how many people are in like the decision making process with regards to, okay, we're going with these products, it's this material, do you have the final say, or is there like a...
No, it's all me.
It's all you?
It's all me, yeah.
Wow.
But for this one, actually, again, just kind of the storytelling of like the whole South London and Proud mantra. So I actually brought in, you know, a friend of mine. He's like a young brother to me. His name's George. He runs a brand called Favela Studios, based out of South London. So we talk a lot, you know, like got a lot of love and respect for him and what he's doing, just like with his brand. So I actually brought him in to co-produce the collection with me. Mm-hmm. Again, because there's an eye and an understanding for certain things, whether that's simplistic design to intricate details. But I think it's also important to kind of like uplift some of the newer creatives coming out of our area. So really and truly, like as me as the lead on the project, I was working with him, but I also gave him a lot of time and expression to be able to say, this is how the fit should be, this is what it should be, this is, do you know what I mean? So in terms of design, really it was just me and him kind of going back and forth.
Yeah, you've spoken about working with George.
Yeah.
Like, do you collaborate with a lot of other clubs? And obviously, being the first like creative director, like, have you seen any patterns emerging with other creative directors now with other Premier League clubs?
I haven't necessarily collaborated with any other clubs, like because of the talent that I represent. Naturally, I'm always in communication with different clubs in different capacities. But naturally, because of my role, you know, I want to be like hyper focused on Crystal Palace, so I wouldn't do anything to kind of compromise that. But in terms of seeing things replicated, yeah, like, I guess so. But that's just the natural progression of how things go, especially within sports, you know, or football specifically. But I think, if I'm honest with you, there's always been, not always, there have been creative departments within certain spaces. Maybe just not with a lead creative director. They have creative departments. One that do that really well is Arsenal, for instance. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
they're doing amazing. Look what my brother Fode is doing over there. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure I've spoken to him about actually the delegation between the team. It's a machine over there. So, you know, getting a group of people that really get this and understand how to build this out is a huge thing. And then, you know, who else is doing it really well? Like Chelsea sometimes touch in and out of like their cultural moments and how they can build on specific collections and collaborations. You know, Manchester United again. Do you know what I mean? I'm actually United fan at heart, of course. But like Crystal Palace is my team. Do you know what I mean? So it's so there are teams touching upon it. And look, you see now, like, think about it. Everyone's talking about a third kit. You know, you've got everyone coming in. You've got brands collaborating with certain clubs. It's not a surprise now. Do you know what I mean? So I think, you know, fashion and football right at this moment are having a real love moment. Yeah. Where everyone wants to get in because it seems like the cool thing to do. But not just that, I think it's just another form of expression. Yeah. And I think it's a great thing to have. Yeah. I think it's what we've always wanted.
100%. And you spoke about like, the collection being, it's all Crystal Palace, right? Like you're not leaning on like brands or anything like that. So when it comes to actually, I suppose, marketing it, are you, like, what's your preference? Is it using the players? Is it using like staff within the club? Is it using people from the community? What's your approach going to be?
Funny, interesting. It's good you asking these questions actually. Because no, we didn't use no players.
Oh really?
No, like I think it's always going to be good, and when they decide to wear it, they wear it. That's fine. But I think, again, when you're building something, you want to see what the independent strength looks like.
I like.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I think it is, and it's not a cheat code to use players. I think that's the natural thing to do.
If you got it.
You got it. You know, and they did actually ask me, and I was just like, no, let's not do it.
Wow.
Yeah, like we didn't really shoot anything in and around the club like that. You know, it was just about really letting this thing stand independently. Yeah. Then we can build a case study and see what it would do next time around. Okay. I was really strong on like, let's work this as its own thing.
Yeah. I love that. And then, like in terms of like your creative process, like it's obviously developed over the years. You've mentioned the fact that you've had like clothing brands before.
Yeah.
Can you just walk us through, like how is it you draw inspiration for your collections, and like what's your typical way of working?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, like, I love marketing, I love PR, I love branding, the whole thing. So my brain, it moves at like 1,000,000 miles per hour. Do you know what I mean? Like, honestly, someone could be talking to me and my mind's in the clouds.
Yeah.
So I'd like to say my mind's very colourful in that sense. So when I'm having conversations and it's time for me to kind of produce something, I'm inspired by everything. The conversations, the history, the colours, I think just everything in and around it. I think you've got to warm yourself into learning how to grab inspiration from the finer details. And literally, do you know what I mean? I can't explain. Someone could say something and a specific word sticks out to me, and that is what I tie down to a feeling, an emotion, a colour. Do you get what I'm saying? Now you can start to see and paint the pictures of something just off one word. It's just about taking one detail and seeing how you can expound. Remember, like the old school like spider diagrams, you start with one thing and then you have everything that kind of connects. That's how my mind works. So it's like I'll have something in the middle and then I kind of start to like build out around it based on what I get from the central point.
Mm-hmm. And like, I suppose my question is, are you like under pressures from the club to like deliver things by a certain time, or
No.
The process is finished when the process is finished?
No, like obviously there's times and seasons, but if I'm honest with you, that's not really on us. Like again, running it independently, we can release when we need to release. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm honest with you, this collection is very late. It's very late, but that's just due to maybe sometimes internal complications and seasons and timings and maybe clubs not performing well. All of these things I never had in my mind before.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Now you're just like, okay, it's supposed to come out this time. Okay, but now we've got to do it in between 3 different kit drops.
Yeah.
The kit drops are going to take precedent. Mm-hmm. Then straight after that, we've got an international break.
Yeah.
Like, how does it work? Do you know what I mean? Then, okay, we're doing this. And then someone else. Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to not feel the pressure. They've been quite lenient, if I'm honest with you.
I love that.
I got to give it to them, man. Yeah, for sure. I really do.
This sounds like a great place to work.
Yeah, no, they're good people.
And like, so this podcast, like typically, we're like about advising people, right? So, you've mentioned there, like, there are a lot of things that can potentially cause delays.
Yeah.
Like, what is your approach to like overcoming setbacks? Because you've mentioned there, like, you might want to release at one time, but you're not able to. Like, put me in your shoes. Like, what is it you do to overcome maybe not getting news that you want to hear? Like,
I think the hard part of that is when things don't usually go your way, people kind of scramble to find like a replacement. And I think this isn't just about the fashion or the role that I'm in now, but it's my job, it's my 9 to 5. I have to be a problem solver. So even before anything is released, I thought of probably 3 or 4 other options just in case. Now, I'll give you another example, right? If I had released this collection if I had announced the collection when it was supposed to be released and it didn't come out, and I designed the product with players attached to it before the transfer window, tied down to certain moments for Crystal Palace, I would have been screwed because it's product we can't use no more. Yeah. Actually, the one player that we used in their announcement video for the new kit was Michael Elise in one of our products, which was a leak, which no one would have clocked, right? And at that moment, if I had used him, which would have been probably like the central figure to use at the time, I couldn't use none of the images because he's gone. Yeah. So this is why, even again, part of my process was like, let's just stay away from the players. Because I know at that time, who would I use? Probably a Bereze and Michael Elise as like the lead two to speak to the audience that I wanted to speak to. So, the problem solving element of it is just saying, okay, if it doesn't work around this moment, before you've even got to the process of development, you have to have 2 or 3 other options just in case. Do you know what I mean? And that's why the design process is important, because it's not tied down to a specific pillar. I'm able to be a bit more flexible, and I thought about that when we was designing down to the launch.
I love that. And like for you, this is your first project, right, with the club.
Yeah.
What has been your most challenging the most challenging aspect of this first project?
Well, I think the understanding, and again, like I really champion the guys at Crystal Palace, but sometimes is through collaboration, you have to sometimes dim your light. And that's not a negative thing. I think when I say dim in your light, it's not putting yourself on a pedestal. It's that, like I said, you come in, you're like, I want to do this. Be like, doing that and trying to fit it into here doesn't work. So we've got to start off small. So meaning the light, what's inside of you that wants to come out, because sometimes it could be based around ego and pride and wanting to show and develop. But you're like, no, these guys have a model that have worked for them for years. How do I work in collaboration with them to tell their story, but through another vehicle and lens? That's probably been the trickiest thing, because I've presented many things. I'm like, oh, this is amazing, which I know will go. I'm used to being the final say on all my projects. I'm not that. Even though I am the one developing it and I can be creative, there are still little things that like, we don't know if we have the audience to it. They're not giving me a hard no. It's just like, we're not sure. So is there another way that we can kind of approach this?
Yeah.
So I think that's been the tricky thing, is that understanding the creative world and corporate world are two separate entities. But when they collide, how do you step outside of your own pride and say, let's meet here to make it work? That's probably been the trickiest thing, because you've also got to educate them on the world that you live in. They don't live in it. We just think everyone's on social media. Everyone sees the announcements. Everyone sees what's going on. These guys don't. That's not their world. So I have to present it to them.
Yeah,
tricky.
I love that. And like, if you could go back to like yourself on like your first day at the club, what advice would you give yourself?
That's an interesting question. What advice would I give myself? I would say, don't be thrown off by the setbacks, but also understand that you're stepping into a world that doesn't understand the world that you live in. That's the biggest part of it. I think, just kind of what I explained beforehand, if I'm honest with you, because sometimes you might feel like you're repeating yourself.
No.
And you're not really ever challenged on your creativity. You usually champion for it. But when you go into a place, as I said, where people don't understand certain things, they might just be like, are people going to buy that? Yeah. And it's not a disrespect. Sometimes it's just not my world. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So luckily, I'm not someone who's disheartened by stuff like that, but it's just about preparing yourself for some of those knockbacks, because at times maybe, and this is in any space, they could feel quite personal, and it's not, because ideally I'm actually coming into their establishment. Do you get what I'm saying? So they're telling me the way they want stuff, which is understandable. So
do you know as you speak there, do you know what it reminds me of? Have you seen Air?
Of course,
film? Yeah, like you really remind me of I think the guy's called Zani Vaccaro, the guy who ends up signing MJ. Like, they didn't understand that he really knew ball, and that he knew they had to put all the chips on MJ.
Yeah, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like,
sometimes it's like that. But do you see what he done with his persistence and where it landed them to this day? Exactly. And I think it's the same within this space. Like I said, it's like, people say you've got to see it to become it. I don't really believe in that statement. Like, for my own personal journey, anyway, I think just because of where we've come, or I've come from, shall I say, like, what I'm living is all I know, and that sometimes is the short straw. Yeah. So my tolerance for certain things probably is a lot higher than others, just based on always having to produce rather than being given. Yeah. So when I step into those rooms, I remember one time one of the guys at the club asked me, "Are you nervous? Like, this is a big task." I was like, "No, I've done more for myself." Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And that wasn't in arrogance. I think it's just that on my journey, I've done stuff for me that is a lot more nerve-wracking, because one, it's my money that I'm putting up. Two, the designs I have to lean on. So for me, that has a much more of a weightier responsibility. The difference is this is probably the biggest scale of what I've produced at in terms of collaboration and output. That's all. And
what's your vision for, I suppose, Palace, and maybe even the wider footballing landscape with regards to culture over the coming years?
Yeah, well, look, I always try to stamp as well. For me, it's not just about football.
Okay.
Like, and it's funny because of my appointment. I think people kind of now lock me into football. I work in an array of sports. Like I said, boxing, athletics, football. Got BMXer, a longboarder, a female rugby player. Do you know what I mean? It's about like the interesting spaces in those niches and how do you market and promote maybe like really key areas that are very interesting, and from the, I guess, the micro and promoting to the macro. So it's kind of like, for me, it's just about being intentional with like the passions that I have within those spaces.
Yeah.
I think like the landscape in sports in general is a very interesting one, because for a long time the community that are interested in sports have lived very far from sports. Like, it's not a very like up close and personal thing. Meaning, it's funny because most musicians, you can probably see them out. You see them at shows. With athletes, you don't really see them out and about. Do you get
Why do you think that is?
No, I get it. It's like it's protection. Like, they spend a lot of time training. It's value and protection, but also the culture around athletes and musicians is very different. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, and I say this respectfully, musicians sometimes it sometimes can stem around maybe bravado, or you know, the portrayal to become something, or even if you are something, meaning that you are promoting yourself because it is in your message. Mm-hmm. Where athletes, the message is completely different. Do you get what I'm saying? So they just live a completely separate life because they know how in their sector they are just very sheltered because of like the training regiments and so on and so on.
But are athletes trying to bridge that gap now? Because I had like actually had another creative director on before, mm-hmm. and I think what she was saying was the fact that like footballers or whoever it may be, athletes, artists, they're very expressive.
Yes.
But people only know them for what they express on the pitch, but they have other interests.
Yeah, of course.
And I think what you're seeing with a lot of these brand partnerships and like the fact that they're walking up Fashion Week and stuff like that is that footballers want to show that there's more to them than kicking ball or mm-hmm. basketball or whatever sport it may be.
Yeah.
And like, is it an effort from both sides? Like, the footballers want to connect more with society, and also like brands and stuff want to connect people more with the talent, I suppose.
Yeah, like I said, it's been around for a while. Do you know what I mean? It's just that usually the powers that be in the media don't really service the athletes because they've got stuff that they got to sell, headlines. Mm-hmm. So what it does is it puts a wedge between like the audience and the athletes. And then the athletes actually don't want to do any media because the people that are supposed to be telling their stories are not doing it in their favour. Yeah. But then, you know, like I said, I have my own agency, the Mailroom, where I manage talent, right? So you think about it, I know someone you've had on the show, like Essen, for instance, right? You've got like Be Engaged, you've got my agency, the Mailroom, you've got Ten Toes, like you've got guys that understand the value of the players or sporting talent that they represent, and understand that sometimes you have to take the narrative, be in control of the narrative and take the power out of the media's hands and funnel it through a concentrated method. I think that's the thing that you're probably seeing now. Yeah. It's not just about social media. You've got to build an organic platform and profile by being intentional with what you want people to see.
And like, just on that, like you've mentioned the Mailroom a couple of times, so I think like obviously you have the big focus with Palace at the moment, but like you said, you run your own business. And I think at the start you said, I didn't even want it. So like, can you like take us back? Like, you mentioned the fact that you started off with Zaha, and now you've got people that span across different disciplines. Yeah. Can you just tell us more about how the Mailroom, like its mission and how it's come about, the roster? Yeah,
and I'm not just saying like, I didn't want it, but it was never my plan. Okay. Meaning, when I was looking after Wilf, I was happy looking after Wilf. He was a friend turned client, and he was doing great work.
And when you were looking after him, was that in terms of like brand activations, exposure, marketing?
Exactly, and I think that's because we had the brand together. I would go with him to his meetings to try and leverage our brand, and I would be like, where are your people, that your agents that are supposed to be with you in these meetings, helping you to leverage on this? Because some of these guys are not as business savvy. So you get someone that sells them a dream on, you can be this, but the money's not right. Yeah. Or the creative execution's not right. And it just doesn't make sense for who they are. It just doesn't align. So I guess for me, it started off with Wilfred. And do you know what it was? I was doing some good work with him that actually I was getting recommendations in, because it was around the time where he's moved to Manchester United and then back to Palace, and then, you know, the media wasn't really, like, they was being a bit funny with him, right? So my understanding of what I wanted to do, as a friend even, was to really, again, allow him to be in control of his own narrative. Let's not stop doing all these exclusive interviews with the wrong platforms. I'm very big into like documentaries, and like in the States, I think they hold their culture really well. So I was very familiar with like platforms like Players Tribune, Uninterrupted, The Boardroom, do you know what I mean? Like, and some of those more cultural platforms to tell stories on. So what I was doing is just taking him around and just telling these stories away from sporting platforms. Because there's no pressure to deliver. You're just speaking to an authentic platform. The purists are always going to read because it's based on who it's based on.
Yeah.
But then you also pick up new audiences. So just having a number of success with Wilf, I then picked up Mikel Antonio, who's also is a good friend of mine. I went to school with Mikel. I know his family really well. And
his story is also quite interesting as well, because he was like non-league,
non-league, man. He just came up and made it into the Prem like within his 20s.
Yeah, wow.
Do you know what I mean? To becoming like West Ham United's all-time top goal scorer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Beautiful story. And, you know, then working with Mikel, because I know his agent really well as well. And I remember, like, after we had like a few years of working together, I remember him coming to me and saying, Kenny, where was you when I was playing for England? Or I got that call up. He's like, I needed someone like you. And for me, that stuck with me. Because you got like a top flight Premier League player who's very confident, but doesn't see the commercial value in themselves because they don't see it in their community. And then again, what happened is it just started to build out until I realized, actually, I've got a ceiling here, one, because it's just me. And two, it's not just about me working with friends who are professional athletes. It's a service that these guys actually need. You're in control of people's lives. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
And you see it every day. How many times have you seen the media trash Raheem Sterling or Marcus Rashford, and they'll talk about gun tattoos on his legs but not understanding the reference because they're not culturally aligned. You know, even when he explained about, you know, how he lost his dad, that was mad, because then people was killing him in the media about that.
It was mad.
They would talk about him buying his mama X amount valued car, but won't talk about the X amount that he spends in Jamaica in academies and building up his local community, investing into charity. They don't.
No.
So I realized actually it was a service that was much more bigger than myself and financial gain, which is what we all want, obviously. But it was a service that I think these guys actually need, because there's not a lot of creatives in that space that can help them to kind of reformat and model themselves and target their voices.
I love that. And like, you know, earlier in the conversation, you spoke about how you went and got this stuff. Like, to somebody who maybe has a bit of access, can see a problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah.
All right, you see the problem needs to be solved. Like, what are the steps you take, like, to go about, you know, building out Mikel Antonio's like marketing arm? Like, how is it you start to piece the things together? Because it's one thing knowing, it's another thing executing and doing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know it's a hard question.
No, I'm just trying to figure out a way to frame it. Okay, ask me again in a bit more of a concentrated way.
Yeah, like, how have you taken? What is your process for taking the business, I suppose, from nothing to something? Because you mentioned the fact that you didn't aim for financial gain, but it sounds like there's a lot of work.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So are you just going having meetings for having meetings' sake?
Yeah.
Like, what's the structure?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't understand it because I wasn't familiar with anyone that was doing it. Pretty sure there was in some spaces, but I wasn't familiar with it. So I was just doing what I felt and thought was right, and luckily it was at the time, right? But I'm more of an attention to detail guy. So I'm very skeptical of how I waste someone's time, because I don't like my time wasted. So for instance, okay, this is the best way to break it down when it comes to like marketing and promoting the guys that I represent. I can do, the reason why I can do a good job for Wilfred is because I know him as a person. I spent time with him. I spent time with his family. We share moments about his likes and dislikes and, you know, his passions. And because I understand him, I'm able to speak to him with you and maybe make you feel like you know him based on my conviction of how I know him. That's just all it is. Just to really cut out all the noise. Like, because I know him and I understand him, I'm able to speak on his behalf in an organic way because I know what he likes, what he doesn't like, what brands he wears, what brands he doesn't wear. And all it is taking that boutique approach and just replicating it across everything. It could be a person or it can be a entity like Crystal Palace. You just have to know what you're speaking about.
Yeah, I love that. And I suppose my question off the back of that is like, wealth is wealth. Like, footballers are footballers.
Yeah.
So because of that, knowing them, is it easy to get access to like the brands and collabs that you want to help tell their story best, or is that something that you had to go and fight for?
Okay, so I'd be lying if I said it didn't make it easier, but no, it doesn't make it easy at all. I think that's like a false misconception, and I think there's probably some exceptions to the rule. Like, I'm talking like those, I don't know, like the Jude Bellinghams right now. Do you get what I'm saying? And it's always hard to put people on tears, but I think if we're just going to be very honest, you know, there's very few brands that are going to say no to Jude, but what he picks is what's important. So I think it's still about having intention. But if that was the case, you would see a lot more athletes with a lot more brand sponsorships.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't.
Yeah.
And I tell people, just because you're a top flight athlete, it doesn't mean that you can, you know, your commercial value is high, because some people don't know how to market or promote themselves. They don't have a unique or authentic audience, or they just don't do a great job, which is, I understand sometimes, of telling people who they are. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's why sometimes it's important to have the right people behind you to kind of push your vision out for you.
I love that. And yeah, two questions I have there. So one, like, maybe some athletes are going to be listening to this. You spoke there about not having a unique and authentic audience. What is it they can do to help build that unique and authentic audience?
Yeah, I think, see, this is the tricky one. If you're talking about doing it themselves, then I think you've just got to be very intentional with what you are about and what you stand for as a person, and just be very down the line with conveying that message to your public. You know, if you're into philanthropy, then let the world see that you're into philanthropy. If you're into certain brands, let them see, or music, for instance, let them see you're into music. Because then if you want an audio brand, then there's the synergy where you can connect. Let them see you in the changing rooms or with your peers playing music. If they want you to, you know, if you're talking about, for instance, where's one that I can tell you that's easy? Because athleisure brands are easy. Everyone's into kind of like fashion a bit. Do you get what I'm saying? Or if you're an athlete and your sports brands are going to be easy to connect with. But okay, I'll give you an example. So a young lady that I look after now, Ellie Kildun, the rugby player, you know, she like obsessed with photography. So, you know, she was running around, bought a camera, and, you know, then was getting loaned by a camera from a brand, actually to take pictures of her teammates, which then actually she was hired by, you know, the Women's Rugby League to take pictures for the league at certain games because it was a passion of her. And I said, I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but it was her organic way of expression. Declan Rice has also started his own Instagram account for his own photography too. Yeah, like, do you know what I mean? And I noticed, because I know his agent really well, like Alex Wildy, who's a good friend of mine as well. You know, I noticed he was using like a Leica camera. It's a segue into the brand because you're organically using it. You're taking pictures. He's into golf. He is golfing all the time. If they want to, you know, work with some of the, you know, the golf leagues or whatever it may be, it's a walkthrough for him because that's his lane. It's what he does in his personal time, which is special. So you just got to be intentional.
I love that. Intentional, and amplify what you do in your personal
for sure.
out. And then, like, for you, like with your roster, like, you know, you've obviously had success. Like, what is it that makes you want to sign someone?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because I get asked this all the time, and I don't really have like one way. Like, there's some people that are just like sick performers on the pitch. That is true. But that's not enough for me to sign one. Yeah, in any field, you obviously want like sometimes the pinnacles, right? But the other side of it, sometimes people just got really interesting stories. Do you know what I mean? It's like they have like a very unique sense of style, not just like they're just into fashion. Like, I give you an example, like someone who we've just recently started working with, like, is like Joe Willock.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and like, say for instance, like a lot of people, like all athletes have money, so them buying clothes is next to none. Yes. But like the way he puts his clothes together is what sets him aside for me. Very understated, not too brand heavy, but you could see him on a day out and be like, he dresses amazing, but you will know the brand, whether it's Loewe or his Bottega or Rick Owens, like he puts his outfits together extremely well. But because of my personal connection, I could identify with that. And I said, we could be doing more in that area. How do we take that and then put it in bigger spaces? He's also something that I think that he speaks about quite a lot is his faith. Every Sunday, like he'll put up when he's in church, he puts up scriptures all the time. That is another segue, because that's part of his identity. To understand who he is, you've got to understand that side that he organically promotes. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? He's a family man. You see him, like, you know, even the agency that represents him, I can't remember the name of it actually, but it's like his brother. Do you know what I'm saying? That represents him. And then not only that, his other brother is playing, you know, football too. And then his dad is part of the management company. He's a family man. So when you're marketing and promoting him, you know there's certain ways that you shouldn't be pitching him, because it doesn't stand with who he is as a person. So, yeah, I think that's just it. It's like they just need to be honest with who they are and just let the world see it in its truest form.
And like on the flip side of that, if you was to like, I'm sure you've turned down people like you know, is there anything that sticks out to you as to why you'd be like, you know what, maybe they're not the right kind of person that we want to work with at this moment in time? Sometimes
it's just like personal taste. You've got to be honest with yourself. It's not that they're not marketable. Maybe they're just not the right client for you. Yeah, it took me a while to be honest with that.
We don't want quavers. Yeah. We want Thai sweet chili.
Yeah. We want the Thai sweet chili. Yeah, it's just like that sometimes. And I think even just on the other side of it is that sometimes you can work with clients that want all the bells and whistles and just don't want to do the work. Yeah. And I'm not here for that. Okay. Early days, maybe I might have bent my back a bit just to kind of like, I don't want to ask about the money and so, because I needed to stay afloat. Now, like, I didn't start my own business to be a slave to someone. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. I want to work with people that want to work with me. If you don't, then unfortunately, like, it's just not a relationship that needs to. Yeah, it just doesn't serve none of us. Yeah. So, and I'm happy to do that. We can still talk and be amicable, but we just go our separate ways.
I hear that. And then, like, the final thing in this section, like, in terms of like building out your own team, right? Yeah. You do a lot with Palace, with the Mailroom. I could be wrong, but you're not doing it all yourself, right? No. So in terms of like finding the right people within your own team, how is it you go about hiring people, your soldiers? Not even your soldiers, like collaborators to
like
assist.
Collaborators. But see, that's a tricky one. Again, because I haven't had no background in it, I think hiring is probably one of the hardest things to do.
Which is why, from your experience, what have you learned?
It's a tough realm. You'd be willing to lose money because like everything's trial and error. And it doesn't necessarily sometimes mean someone's bad. It just means that it might have just not worked. The timing's not right. I've been fortunate enough to have like my core team around me is a group of people that I've known for quite a while that have transitioned with me across different businesses into this space. None of them have come from a sporting background. Actually, I think that's the benefit for us because we look at things very different. So, you know, like my creative lead is like a dope creative, shoots both digital and analog film, but is also a great director and storyteller. You know, my talent manager is great. I've known him for a very long time. My partnerships manager, again, is, two guys I'm working with. Like, I've known him for a while, but I've got an extensive history in the agency side of things, and have a black book and a roster of clients that they could tap into, but also understand the marketing side. So that's the beautiful side of it. But I know when it comes to like scaling up, that's where the hard parts come in. Because not only do you have to find the right person, it's how much you have to pay. And these are the things people don't really speak about. What is the right price for someone like that? What comes along with that? What is their day-to-day? Not only that, you need someone that then, if you're going to be paying at a certain tier, you need someone that's not just going to come in and work. You need someone that's going to come in and teach you. Do you know what I mean? Everyone on your team should be adding value in some way. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm not one of those people. I've got a startup mentality, if I'm honest with you. But I like it when someone can come in and be like, you should be doing something like this, Kenny. That model is okay, but this is not the way it should be doing. You can cut out probably 80% of what you're doing just by doing it like that. And I think that's the tricky thing, because it's like, where do you go? You put people on trial. You still got to pay them, but then it doesn't work out. What happens? You got to just reset. And I think that's just what it is. Cash flow. And we're still I'm 100% self-funded.
Wow.
Yeah, like I have no outside capital, like investment. So yeah, it's tricky.
And I think, yeah, sometimes like it's just good for people to hear that, because I think, you know, to your point, like from the outside looking in,
yeah,
people can think that it looks one way, but like this is the real of the day to day. Yeah, you get to work with cool brands, you get to work with footballers, but also you got to make sure that, you know, there's payroll. People are actually earning the money when they're working for you. Yeah. It's like giving the whole holistic view as to what it's like to be a founder of a business. 100%. You obviously work both roles, right? You're a busy person. Like, how is it you maximize productivity? Do you box things off, like I'm doing Palace in the morning, I'm doing Mailroom at night? Is it just a mixture? Like, how do you set out your days?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think historically I've been bad at that. But I think the Palace role forced me to get my stuff together. So yes, my assistant will like schedule and block out certain things to do. Like Mondays are my admin days, so I don't take no meetings on that day. It's literally about my clients, chasing, following up emails, invoicing, the important stuff. Like, just, you know, that the Mondays are kind of set aside for me to do that. I kind of now lock in 2 days for meetings, and if they are going to be outside, they usually are tied around some sort of like either a project that we're going to work on or remuneration, not just introductions. Because unfortunately I just don't have the time like right now just to be going, okay, let's just meet, we can just do it on the phone. And sometimes, you know how it is, everyone's chasing each other's diaries, we can do it this day, that day. But plus what I used to do is I'd set meetings throughout the whole week, and I have to travel all the way to one area for an hour meeting, travel an hour and a half back. I've cut out maybe like 3-4 hours of my day that I could have been working. So I have 2 days that are sectioned off to physical meetings, and then the rest of them are like projects. I'm working on projects. I'm speaking with my team. I'm delegating tasks, or we might have like outside projects that we're working on. So I do have a bit more of a strict regimen, but I'm still working on it, man. It's
always a work in process.
Yeah, it's always a work in process, bro.
I love it. And like, there's a few things I want. So first of all, to anybody who's looking to maybe like get a start in a creative field, or level up in a creative field, like what would your key piece of advice or a takeaway be?
It's tricky, because I always say like the entry point into the creative world can be tough, because sometimes the roles are not clear. So for me, it's like really work on building your personal portfolio. And it doesn't mean you have to have all the biggest cameras in the world. Start with what you have.
Even a phone.
And I know, and sometimes people think it sounds so cheesy. I've seen, like, even down to us, like, we've created, like, whole, like, content pieces just on the phone. I think it's actually quite cool to challenge yourself in that way. Do you know what I mean? So I think, like, make sure you build on your personal portfolio. Again, from the first time I spoke to Steve and the Palace team to when I was appointed, if I hadn't continued to build in between, I probably wouldn't have had the role, because I was able to go back and say, look, over the last year, this is what I've done within this space. I'm a lot bigger than what I was doing back then. So that's just what it is. I always say, that's why I say my biggest success has been my business or businesses. So like, just continue to build and create, and then just allow, you know, that to speak for itself.
Yeah. I love it. And then to anybody who's like potentially looking to like found a business, as a founder, like what's something that you wish you knew sooner, even though you've been a founder for a long time?
It's tough, man, and it can feel lonely at times. Do you know what I mean? Everyone likes to talk about the exciting stuff. Like, it can feel lonely, man. Do you know what I mean? But I think that is part and parcel of what it is. Like, I champion it. I love it because maybe I'm just weird, but you know what I mean? But I think that's just what it is. Sometimes you get to, you're living out a dream, and that's what kind of that's my dopamine fix. But I think one thing I say to a lot of people nowadays is like, if I was speaking to my younger self now or a younger founder, it's just like, who wants to start a business, like being confident in your ignorance. And the reason why I say that, and like the real definition of ignorance is like just the lack of knowledge, There's a lot of things that you do in the beginning, once you start to move further down in your journey and you realize what you could be doing with that time or for the value of the money that you should be getting, you won't do it anymore. And usually it's those early stage things that get you to the bigger points. So meaning also again, like a young me, not knowing the scale of what I'm in, but feeling like I was doing great work, I just approached Steve Parrish. Do you get what I'm saying? In my ignorance, it's like, I'm just going to speak to Steve. Like, he's office, I'm just going to go upstairs and speak to him. But now I'll be like, I can't just bother him. Like, do you know what I mean? I can't just walk up to the chairman of Crystal Palace 100%. And just be like, I want to speak to you. But it got me to where I am. So when I say, again, being bold in your ignorance or being confident in your ignorance, it's just having an awareness of saying there's a feeling that you go with, and be cautious with it though. But like sometimes just shooting your shot. Because as I said, the further along the line that you come, there are certain things that I'd be like, I wouldn't do that for that amount of money now. It wouldn't make sense. But I remember first getting that and being like, taken back by it. And sometimes it's that childlike, what's the word? Curiosity that kind of gets you to the next stage. Because a lot of my biggest projects are actually projects I weren't paid for. Do you know what I mean? They were passion projects or creative projects or stuff that I'd done for friends. The stuff that I got paid for have been a result of those passion projects.
I get that.
So I think that's just what I would say to them, man. And just continue to be curious and ask questions. I think, and never be afraid to say you don't know. Like, I think sometimes we sit in these rooms and there's this image that we want to paint. You know, when you first come in and people are like, you know, and our KPIs and ROIs and so, and I just tell people, slow down, please. Like, like, can you just break it down in a way that I'm able to digest it? Never feel silly. Trust me, because sometimes it is the way people speak. Sometimes it's about people just projecting. Just go in there and just be yourself. That's all. I love it. And yeah, like we spoke off camera. Like, what's next, bro? Because you were telling me that you're starting this new business. Well, by the time this comes out, hopefully it's going to be ready. But can you tell me more about Transmission? Yeah, so Transmission is my production company. I've had the production company under the radar for like the last 3-4 years. Stealth mode. So how it started is the athletes that we represent, when we were doing a lot of our commercial and brand deals, the brands had like really good ideas, and obviously they had the budgets, but I wasn't really happy with like the creative execution. So we was saying to them, you know, why don't you kind of give us the budgets to create the content? And plus you're going to get more out of our clients anyway. You know, but obviously under the guidance of yourself. So we was doing a lot of work behind the scenes of creating, you know, narratives and stories and productions for, you know, both local and global brands. And then naturally, like I've always said, it's like when I'm going to, because I work in such niche spaces with niche athletes, sometimes putting their voices on certain platforms is extremely tricky. Most of the platforms in the UK are all football platforms. The ones that we love are all football platforms. But again, in order for me to pitch an Ellie Kildunn in rugby, a female rugby player, or a Danielle Carter, a female football player, a Joshua Boatsi, a boxer, a Daryl Nita, a GB sprinter, I have to go to more of like the fashion platforms, which is fine. I think it's dope. But the problem is when it comes to those fashion culture platforms, you are then locked in by seasons and moments, because that's how they plan their issues. And also, because of the world of talent that they have, sometimes the guys that you have, even though they're big in their world, they might not be big enough for their platform for them to accept. So I've always struggled with positioning. And then I think for me in the UK, it's like we don't have no multi-sports platforms that both service like culture, like exec culture, like the people actually are doing the deals and behind the scenes. And then someone that like a way to kind of link all of those entities together. So for me, it was just about understanding that with the need of creativity, but all of these narratives that we have, the end goal was to build the platform for the content to sit on. Mm-hmm. Now, the best way for me to explain it is imagine like a complex magazine meets the storytelling of Uninterrupted, which is LeBron James and Maverick Carter's storytelling platform, with the Boardroom, which is Rich Kleiman and Kevin Durant's platform, where they talk about really like the intricate details about the business behind sports and the deal makers and the people that are really pushing the movements forward. But just something that we have for ourselves. It's not always just about the big names. And again, there's obviously going to be some safeguarding, but I think the most thing is that the big thing about it is that we will have a platform that can service the rugby players from a cultural standpoint. We can service the longboarders or the niche communities in spaces that we just want to be told. And then also just the creators behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. I think that's a big thing. You know, it's not just me in this position as creative director. There's loads of people that are doing amazing stuff that people have no idea that they're doing. 100%. The Grace Ladojas, who's Skepta's old manager, that Nigeria kid that we were speaking about, she designed it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, you got Stefan Ashpool from the brand Pagao, you know, who's got that colourful basketball court in Paris. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I might have.
Yeah, but it's like so prominent. But like, you know, he was the one that designed all the kits for the French team for Paris Olympics. But also is like one of Nike's biggest collaborators, you know. But then you've got like these dope people behind the scenes, and sometimes when you're connecting brands, culture, athletes, these are the tastemakers that are doing great stuff, but they're not usually people that are in the forefront. I think it's important to tell those stories too, because then you can connect the worlds.
So is that what you're going to be doing, telling their stories?
100%.
And is it like you go onto the app and you're able to see the stories there?
It'll be online. So it'll be a website predominantly. And then it will be in the format of like written conversations, short forms content or documentary style, brand partnerships in terms of like partnering with brands to tell stories of both athletes and execs. Mm-hmm. Content platforms in terms of like podcasts and sit down series tackling a range of topics within our community. Yeah. Well, that can be into food, culture, like just ways that people can connect through like those how can I say it, the intersection of each system.
Everything.
Yeah,
I love it.
So I'm excited about that for sure.
Kenny, you're a man that does so much, man. This is such an insightful conversation. Just before we get into the quickfire round, if there's one thing you want people to take away from today's conversation, like what would it be?
The things that you dream of that seem so far away can become so close really quickly. Like, trust me, I had no passion to be where I am now, or desire, or foresight, whatever you want to like put it down to. But trust me, that everyone that you see that is successful once started out as you. Do you get what I'm saying? No one like it's, you know, we hear the 50 cents and the so and so's, and listen, some of these guys just started here. Like even just take my brother Wilfred Zaha. You know, coming from Ivory Coast with his family, and I think he's got like 8-9 brothers and sisters, to be in here in like, I remember there was like all of them sharing like a 1-bed flat in Croydon. This guy's like one of the biggest footballers in the world now. Like, and we just look at him as Wilfred Zaha, but he started there. And I'm only using him as a reference because it's a bit more closer. Yeah. You can take that across anyone.
100%.
So whatever looks very far can become very close, like so quickly. So I think dreaming and being inquisitive is like the best thing that you can do, man. Just, I got an idea. Like, you can think of 10 things why you shouldn't do it, but the one thing why you should do it is the driving force for me.
Yeah.
I don't really sometimes have to knuckle down on the 10 because I might as well just put the bullet in the chamber, spin the barrel, play Russian roulette, see how it works. The worst thing that can happen is it just doesn't. And I think that's one thing Virgil always said. He was like, failure is like such a fake system that we're put into. What is failure? Something just not working, but like to feel like that you're kind of tied down by failure is like the worst thing in the world, because you take the data, you pick yourself up again and then just move on.
100%. Do you feel like, and just talking about failure and stuff, do you think it's like a culture thing from the UK? Because when I think like US, I think like everybody's like entrepreneurial. They want everyone to make it. They're trying to lift people up. But in the UK, it's a bit more of like a crabs in a bucket mentality, where they see people get up, they're trying to pull them down. Like even like Stephen Bartlett as an example, like he's doing a big thing with his podcast. All of a sudden, like, okay, like his adverts like been like taken down by watch, and then like we knew he was fake. This that. Like, it's like people are so quick to like pull you down. Like what is it about like UK mentality, bro?
British culture, man. Yeah. Like, we are so conservative. First of all, it's like people are scared to actually say what they do because they don't want to feel like their ego is driving them. Sometimes it's just not that. I think that's the crabs in the barrel mentality. Like, and actually trying to be humble is probably one of the biggest ego flexes that most people do. Yeah, you know, I don't really do that much. Like, come on.
Just talk.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to know what you do. That's why we're asking. You know, you go to, like, the US and other parts of the world, someone tell you, man, I just closed a £10 million deal yesterday. And it's not even, like, in a flexing way, but even if it was, listen, I want to know how do we do this? Like, how do we get here?
That's it, bro.
So I think, you know, you see it across everything we do. It's like when people run businesses and they're having success, they're quick to tear you down. When athletes, they're doing something, the public are quick to tear them down over certain moments. I think it's just the demographic of the people within the UK and what their culture is, or our culture is. Whatever. Like what our culture is really not to build up. We don't have a macro culture of supporting and building and collaborating. Everything is very separate. And it's like, you can do well, but not too well, because there has to be a catch to you. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think that's just what it is. Like, so sometimes I just sit in my corner, do my work, and figure it out. And when I go over to the US, it's a whole different embrace, but it really charges you up.
And I think, like, just to that, like, I'll finish by saying, like, if you feel like, you know, there are people who aren't really backing it, not saying like find new friends, but you need to surround yourself with people who want to see you succeed and they're trying to succeed. It's like you are like the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Most definitely.
If you don't feel like your relationships are giving, go and find the relationships that are going to give you what you need to succeed. And I don't know who needs to hear that, but you're welcome. You're welcome. But Kenny, now this has been such a sick conversation. We've got a quick fire round.
Yeah, go.
You ready, bro?
Yeah, I'm ready, man. I'm ready.
Team colours versus bold innovation when you're designing stuff for Crystal Palace.
Bold innovation every time.
Have players model new designs or use actual models?
Actual models.
Money or happiness?
I'm going to say happiness.
Okay.
But I'm not one of those people that are going to be like, you don't need money to make you happy. I think it adds.
Yeah.
But happiness, I'm going to pick every time.
I love it. Limited edition pieces or mass market merch?
I'm here for both, man.
Okay, that's fair. Retro designs or futuristic concepts?
I do love a bit of retro, you know, but I'm just going to say futuristic.
Okay.
And I also do like something new.
So emphasize local identity or global appeal, like if we're talking about the collection that's coming out?
Oh, that's a tough one, you know.
We're going with both.
Yeah, I would say both, but can I explain?
Yeah.
Just quickly.
Yeah.
I think the aim is to be global anyway.
Yeah.
So I'd be silly just not to say that. But like I said, maybe it's because of where I'm at. Like, there's nothing better than your own people supporting locally. But it's not enough. That's all. It's just not enough. Like, I love the fact that like we can be community builders, But like, do you get what I'm saying? You got like a really concentrated. That's why I said I got like a real startup mentality. But the aim is to go global for me anyway.
Yeah,
so I global.
Yeah, I love that. Match day attire or everyday fan wear? And once again, this is like from like a collection standpoint.
Everyday fan wear.
Okay, lovely.
Sure.
And then finally, like, who's your dream dinner guest?
If you ask me right this very second, Steve Stout.
Okay.
Steve Stout. Like, again, for those that don't know, like, Steve Stout is like one of the biggest like cultural tastemakers that we have within our culture in history. He was Nas's manager. So, you know, like when you look at the top, like when people say black excellence, they will mention Jay-Z, the one that now can't be named, and Steve Stout.
Okay.
Steve Stout has like a company called United Masters. He has an ad agency called Translation. But just in terms of like a lot of the biggest like advertisements and campaigns within our culture he's done. So even you think about the McDonald's, that I'm loving it, Steve Stout.
Is it?
Yeah, so he was the one that got Pusha T to because it was actually Pusha T that made up the slogan.
I didn't know that.
And it was Steve Stout that commissioned it.
Oh, wow.
So he's around a lot of those kind of like big plays and moves, and like scoring for movies, and you know, all of the campaigns for like Beats, Apple, his ad agency actually does all the production for it. Wow. But like he's got an extensive history in doing that. Even just like all the promotion for the Super Bowl, all Steve Stout. Okay. So if one dinner guest, Steve Stout 100%.
Okay, I love it. Do you know what's so funny? I know that was the last question, but you know there's always the thing like $500,000 or dinner with Jay-Z. Yeah. $500,000 or dinner with Steve Stout. We're taking the dinner.
Like, right now, sorry Steve, man, but I need the 500. Man. I got a business to run. I got a business to run, man. When the time's right, I'll meet you. Well, funny enough, we've met in passing. Yeah. But like to actually have a concentrated conversation, I gotta tell you, listen, I'm betting on myself, man. Yeah. You get what I'm saying? If you've been on podcasts, I'll watch it. Kenny,
that took me out. I was expecting you to go that. I was expecting to go left. You went right. No, but no, bro. This has been such a sick conversation. We do have a closing tradition. Yeah. You kind of already answered it, but like with everything that you've been through, and knowing what you know now, like what advice would you give your younger self?
For those days that you weren't confident, understand that you've always had what it takes. I think that's it. Because there was days where this felt very dark growing up, South London. There's a lot happening from life and deaths and families and not having enough money and so. And even trying to do something or even have a 9 to 5 is a task. So for those moments where you feel like your tank is empty, just know that you've got enough. I think that's what I would say.
I love it, Kenny. This has been such an insightful conversation. Like, where can people find you if they wanna learn more, bro?
I always find these conversations so like these parts so funny. Don't know why. You know what? LinkedIn is my home. Okay. Love that place. If you like, so it's just under my name, Kenny Annan Jonathan. My Instagram, which is new, I've probably only had it since the beginning of this year.
Is it?
Just after, yeah, but I'm not.
Their followers, teach me.
Yeah, I'm not really into social media like that. But I've had brands, so most of the people that I know will follow me across platforms, isn't it? So my Instagram account is under Free Agent, as free FREE agent, and I think that's just the main two, if I'm honest with you. Yeah. And then the company is the Mailroom, which is the Mailroom, and Transmission is TRNS.
I'm gonna put it in the link. Don't worry.
There we go.
I got you.
So Transmission. They're the kind of things that I've got across board.
Yeah, cool. I'm gonna make sure to link it in the show notes. And guys, if you've gotten to this point in the podcast, you know what to do: like, subscribe, comment, share. Let us know how you find this conversation. Let us know who you want to hear from next. I mean, I heard it sounds like Kenny's going to get us Wilfred Zaha next. I'm joking. But this has been like another episode of What My Best Friend Does. If you didn't know, now you know. Now go outside and take some immediate action. Over and out.